So now that we have the basic concepts of importing 3D models into Unity, applying colliders to them, beyond the obvious of creating things that could act like obstacles. So in this case, I've created one wall object and I've duplicated that and arranged it in space so that not only could this be an obstacle, but it could be something that I can climb on. So if you haven't already discovered this, if you hit the space bar with your first-person controller, it will cause you to jump. So the benefits of creating objects and including colliders or building colliders on them, can be pretty obvious, and we can start to interact with our game objects this way. Well, once an object has a collider, we have other ways that we can interact with it. So I'm just going to delete the cube that I was playing with before, and I'm going to recreate a new cube. And this cube, I'm just going to place it in space and just remind us what happens with the default cube inside Unity. So right now I have this cube. It comes with a collider because it came from Unity, and that means that I can't walk through it. I can jump on top of it, I can jump over it, but when I collide with it, I'm interacting with it, but it's not doing anything. Well, we have the ability through scripting to check for collisions between objects and trigger certain kinds of events. So I want to talk a little bit about scripting. And in order to get this presentation moving forward, I want to make sure that you have the Island Scripts folder inside your Assets folder. So if you haven't already done this, go out to Blackboard, download the Island Scripts folder, unzip the content on your desktop, and drag it into your Assets folder. Okay, I've already done that, and so I have my Island Scripts folder selected. And inside my Island Scripts, you can see that there's a whole bunch of documents that end with a .js extension. So these are JavaScript files, and these are just real small text files that have a bit of script inside them that once they're in Unity and attached to objects will run and execute whatever kind of function is on them. So if you don't have any programming experience, don't run away from the computer at this point, because I'm going to provide the majority of the content that you need to get these basic game mechanics working. But it is important that we can open up a script, look at it, modify it, apply it to different game objects, repurpose it to gain additional functionality out of it. So I'm looking at inside the Island Scripts folder. And in order to demonstrate the basic notions of a script, I want to focus on this rotate script. Now, you'll notice that when I click on it one time, inside the inspector, I get a preview of what the content of the script is. If I double click on the script, it's going to open up in this program called MonoDevelop, which came with Unity. Okay, and MonoDevelop is a scripting environment. It's essentially a text editor, and I'm actually looking at the MonoDevelop environment right now. So from Unity, if I find a script, I can just double click on it. That will load the external editor, and in this case, it's MonoDevelop. Now, this function, this rotate function, this is a very simple script, and before I even explain what's happening, I want to show you how to apply a script to an object inside Unity, and we'll see what happens. So I have this cube here, the cube that I was bumping into, and I'll just lift it up just a little bit. Now I want to apply this JavaScript to this object, and there's a couple of different ways I can do this. I can click and drag and drop the script onto the object in the hierarchy view. Alternatively, if I have the object selected, I can click and drag that script over to the inspector, at which point it inherits an additional component. This script becomes a component that's running on that object. And this is a rotate script, and you'll see that it references the fact that it's a script, and it shows you what script is attached. And if I click on that script, you can see that it's highlighting not only the folder that it exists in, but also the file that's attached to that game object. Now, I'm going to hit the play button just to see what our cube is doing, and what it's doing now is it's rotating in a couple of different directions. Okay, it's rotating pretty fast and looks kind of strange, but that was in fact a rotate script. So let's take a look at the script. I'm just going to toggle the play button. Let's take a closer look at this script and see what it's doing. I'm going to pop open the rotate script by double clicking on the script, and I'm not sure why my window's so huge, so let me just kind of collapse this down a little bit, and I want to resize this. I'll make it much smaller so that we can see and compare this to what's going on in Unity. This script, we dragged and dropped that script onto this object. And so what Unity is doing is it's executing whatever script is attached to that object as long as it exists inside the game environment. And if we take a look at this script, this is just a very simple script. The first bit says it's a function update. And all that means is that it's a function, so it's something that runs. It's a little program that runs. And this update command is a proprietary command inside Unity that's saying every time this script updates, run this little program. Unity, unless we tell it otherwise, will run the update script for every frame that it refreshes. And so our Unity environment, when we hit play, depending on your computer, might be running at 60 frames a second or 120 frames per second. So we're rendering pretty quickly here. And so for every frame that updates here, that script is being executed and modifying the content. If I go back to MonoDevelop here and take a look at this, so we know that we're running a little program, it's a function, and it's happening every time the frame is being updated inside Unity, and it's executing a very specific command. Now remember, we dragged this script on top of this cube, so it's actually talking to this cube. So unless it specifically is looking at another object, it's going to apply whatever the program is to the object that it's attached to. And if I look here, it says transform.rotate. Well, it just so happens this transform, if I look over here at my cube, I notice that there's a transform component. And inside the transform component, there's a rotate component, and there's an X, a Y, and a Z value. And what this script is doing is saying, modify the transform. Okay, so this panel of information, modify it, specifically look at the rotate field, and modify that content based on the three different vectors here. And we have, currently I have 100, I'm actually going to just zero that first value out. We have a value, comma, another value, and I'll talk to you about what that means in the middle here in just a minute, separated by a comma and another value. So we have three different values. Let me just take this first value and clean it up a little bit. I'll just cut it out of the equation. So we have 0, comma, 100, comma, 0. And what that's saying is, for every frame that this updates, modify the rotation. The first value is 0, so don't do anything on the X. The second value was 100, which is the Y value. So in other words, it's going to rotate around the Y. And the Z value, do nothing, or set it to 0. So right now the Y value is the thing that's being updated. So I just modified my script. I'll choose to file save. I'll go back to Unity. When I hit play, we'll see that our script is now spinning our cube along the Y value. So it's working the way that I would expect it to work. And in fact, if I look over here at the Y value, because I have the cube selected, I can see that it's currently updating that Y value every time that frame updates. I'm going to turn the play button off, and I'm going to jump back into my rotate script. So I could access it a couple different ways. I know this is the script that I'm working on. I could double click here. I could select the cube, double click here, or I know I already have it open in MonoDevelop, so I'll just change this application. Now, there was a bit of code that was in here before in this middle value. So we have 0, 100, 0. And it said something. It said multiply by time delta time. And all this is saying is that instead of updating based on every time the frame, instead of measuring the updates and drawing this transition every time the frame updates, factor in real time. This notion of delta time is just a way that Unity keeps track of seconds or real time. So by multiplying a value times delta time, it's a way to tell Unity to ignore how fast a frame rate is updating, because I'm actually working on a pretty relatively old computer. It's a desktop computer. The graphics card is nothing fancy in this computer. Versus if I was working on my laptop, it would run these simulations at two very different frame rates. My laptop is much newer. It runs this kind of simulation much faster than my desktop. And so therefore, if we don't modify this content based on delta time, it's it's multiplying the rotation value based on how fast my frame is updating. Okay, so I would get a different speed of rotation on my desktop than I would on my laptop. So it would run much faster on my laptop than it would. And the way that we correct for that is that we multiply a value times time dot delta time. And all that's saying is multiply that, factor in the number of seconds. So rotate that 100 degrees per every second. Okay, so the function's being run all the time, but it's rotating at a constant rate rather than a rate that's frame rate dependent. Okay, and if that just made you crazy, that information that I just gave you, don't worry about it. We're not going to take a real deep dive into that concept. Just know that when you open your script and you see these values, this string of text, that string of information that's separated by the commas, this bit of information is talking to the y value of the transform rotation of that cube. So download these scripts, integrate them, create a cube, and try to attach the rotation script to the cube and make sure that you're getting the update and the rotation in place. And feel free to play with these values here. You know, if I want to rotate this on the z-axis as well, I could type in 10. I'll slow down this rotation by reducing the number. I'll save and hit play. So I can work back and forth between these two different environments. And so now I see that object rotating. Okay, so experiment with that process, get a handle on applying scripts. We'll take a deeper dive into this and add some basic functionality based on some other scripts that I've provided. We'll do that in the next presentation.